Hello, welcome to the Intellectual Minds Hub. In this video, we will talk about Cold War. The Cold War, a pivotal period in 20th century history, was a prolonged ideological, geopolitical, and military struggle between the two superpowers of the time, the United States and the Soviet Union. It emerged in the aftermath of World War II, driven by profound ideological differences and a quest for global dominance. While the term cold implies the absence of direct military conflict, the Cold War was far from peaceful, encompassing a series of intense proxy wars, nuclear arms race, and diplomatic maneuvers that profoundly impacted the world. During this era, the world found itself divided into two distinct spheres of influence: the Western Bloc, led by the democratic capitalist United States and its allies, and the Eastern Bloc, spearheaded by the communist Soviet Union and its satellite states. The struggle between these two ideological powerhouses dominated international relations and shaped the course of history for nearly 5 decades. The origin of the Cold War can be traced back to the aftermath of World War II, when the geopolitical landscape was dramatically altered and the United States and Soviet Union emerged as the two superpowers with conflicting ideologies and interests. The primary cause of the Cold War was the fundamental ideological differences between the US and the Soviet Union. The US followed a democratic capitalist system emphasizing individual liberties, private property, and free markets. In contrast, the Soviet Union adhered to a communist, centrally planned system advocating for the abolition of private property and the establishment of a classless society. Capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production and the pursuit of profit through free markets and competition. It values individual liberties, private property, and limited government intervention in the economy. The US, as the leader of Western Bloc, championed capitalism as the cornerstone of its system and foreign policy. Capitalism was seen as a symbol of economic prosperity, technological advancement, and individual freedoms. The US promoted capitalist economic policies such as the Marshall Plan to support the recovery of war-torn Western Europe and contain the spread of communism. The economic competition between the capitalist and communist system was a defining feature of the Cold War. Both superpowers sought to demonstrate the superiority of their economic models through their respective achievements and standard of living. While communism is a socio-economic system where the means of production are owned and controlled by the state and resources are distributed according to the principle from which according to his ability to each according to his needs. The Soviet Union, as the leader of the Western Bloc, was a standard bearer of communism and sought to export the ideology to other countries, particularly in Eastern Europe and Asia. The USSR and its influence to establish communist government in Eastern European countries after World War II, creating a buffer zone to protect its border from perceived Western aggression. The ideological conflict between capitalism and communism fueled the arms race and proxy wars as both superpowers sought to demonstrate the superiority of their respective systems. Throughout the Cold War, both capitalism and communism were weaponized in propaganda campaigns aimed at discrediting the opposing systems and winning support for each side's ideology. The Truman Doctrine was a key policy statement delivered by the US President Harry S. Truman on March 12, 1947. It was a response to the emerging threat of communism in Europe, particularly in Greece and Turkey after the end of World War II. In his speech before a joint session of Congress, President Truman outlined the principles of the doctrine, which aimed to contain the spread of communism and provide support to countries facing the threat of communist aggression. President Truman asked Congress to authorize economic and military assistance to Greece and Turkey, which were facing communist insurgencies. He believed that if these countries fell to communism, neighboring countries might follow suit, leading to the expansion of Soviet influence in the region. The doctrine established the policy of containment, which meant that the US would work to prevent the further spread of communism beyond its existing boundaries. This policy guided the US foreign policy throughout the Cold War and led to the US involvement in various regional conflicts to counter the influence of the Soviet Union and communism. Truman agreed that the US had a responsibility to support nations resisting subjugation by armed minorities or outside pressures, emphasizing the moral imperative to counter communist threats and promote democratic values. The Marshall Plan, officially known as the European Recovery Program, was a comprehensive economic aid package initiated by the U.S. Secretary of State George C. Marshall in 1947. The plan was designed to provide extensive financial assistance to war-torn Western European countries to aid in their post-war reconstruction and prevent the spread of communism. In a speech at Harvard University on June 5, 1947, Secretary Marshall outlined the proposal to extend economic assistance to all European countries, including those in the Soviet bloc, but only if they demonstrated a commitment to democracy and open markets. The plan offered substantial financial aid, totaling around $13 billion, to help European nations rebuild their economies, stabilize their currencies, and improve their industries and infrastructure. The Marshall Plan aimed to address the economic devastation caused by the World War II and create stable, prosperous economies that would resist the appeal of communism. The arms race during the Cold War was a critical aspect of the geopolitical competition between the US and the Soviet Union. It refers to the intense and costly race between the two superpowers to develop and stockpile massive quantities of nuclear weapons and other advanced military technologies. The arms race began in the aftermath of World War II as the US and Soviet Union emerged as two dominant global powers. Both countries sought to demonstrate their military might and protect their respective interests. The use of atomic bombs by the US on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan in 1945 further intensified the urgency for other nations to develop their own nuclear weapons, leading to the onset of a nuclear arms race. Both the US and the Soviet Union rapidly increased their stockpiles of nuclear warheads, seeking to build an effective deterrence against each other. The doctrine of mutual assured destruction emerged, which posited that a nuclear war between the two superpowers would result in catastrophic consequences for both sides. This understanding reinforced the notion that any nuclear conflict must be avoided at all costs. Both sides invested heavily in the development of advanced delivery systems, such as intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarines armed with nuclear missiles, and strategic bombers capable of delivering nuclear weapons across long distances. The arms race was extremely expensive for both countries, diverting significant resources away from the other critical needs, such as social programs and infrastructure. The arms race also had global implications as other countries sought to develop their own nuclear capabilities, leading to the proliferation of nuclear weapons. However, the arms race also served as a catalyst for arms control and disarmament agreements, such as the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks and Intermediate Range Nuclear Force Treaty. The arms race came to a turning point in the late 1980s as both superpowers recognized the immense financial burdens and inherent dangers of maintaining such a vast nuclear arsenal. The space race was significant competition between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War to achieve Milestone in space. The first successful launch of an artificial satellite by the Soviet Union was Sputnik 1. The US response to Sputnik, Explorer 1, was launched on January 31, 1958 and became the first US satellite to reach orbit. On April 12, 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first person to journey into space and orbit the Earth. On May 5, 1961, Aaron Shepard became the first American astronaut to travel to space. On July 20, 1969, the US achieved a major victory in the space race when the Edwin Buzz Aldrin on the moon, with Armstrong famously stating, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The space race drove rapid advancement in space technology, propulsion systems, and rocketry. Both nations developed and tested various rockets, leading to the development of more sophisticated launch vehicles. These technological developments had spillover efforts into other industries, stimulating advancement in telecommunications, computer technologies, and materials science. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a tense confrontation between the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War in October 1962. It occurred when the Soviet Union deployed nuclear missiles in Cuba, seen as a direct threat by the US. The US responded with a naval blockade around Cuba to stop further missile shipments. The world was on the brink of nuclear war for 13 days. Negotiations led to the Soviets agreeing to remove the missiles in exchange for a US pledge not to invade Cuba. The crisis ended peacefully, highlighting the dangers of nuclear escalation and the importance of diplomacy. The end of Cold War marked a significant turning point in world history and was a result of several interconnected factors. In the mid-1980s, Soviet leader Gorbachev initiated a series of political and economic reforms. These reforms aimed to modernize the Soviet system and increase transparency. Gorbachev's policy led to greater political freedom, openness in media, and limited market-oriented reforms. However, they also created internal challenges for the Soviet government as they exposed systematic inefficiencies. The Soviet economy faced severe difficulties characterized by stagnation, inefficiency, and shortages of essential goods. The arms race with the US and the cost of maintaining a global presence strained the Soviet budget. In 1989, a wave of peaceful revolutions swept through Eastern Europe, leading to the fall of communist governments in countries such as Poland, Hungary, and the East Germany, etc. These revolutions were largely driven by a desire for political freedom, economic prosperity, and an end to Soviet domination in the region. On November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall, which had separated East and West Berlin since 1961, was opened, symbolizing the end of division in Germany and the Cold War division in Europe. The end of Cold War marked a victory for democracy and freedom and brought about a significant geopolitical shifts. The US emerged as a sole superpower in a unipolar world, while countries in Eastern Europe embarked on paths toward democracy and market-oriented economies. The end of Cold War also paved the way for increased globalization and cooperation among nations. As we look back on the Cold War, we are reminded of the profound impact of ideological conflicts, geopolitical rivalries, and the pursuit of power on a global scale. If you found my video informative, don't forget to press the bell icon and like this video. Thank you.